Because right now, Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nightly Sports Call. I'm Robby Incmikoski. Going to talk a lot of Steelers tonight. We have Brian Batko, Steelers Insider, joining us in just a couple moments. Give us a call, 412-575-2600. Air out all your opinions you have about what happened last night. We're going to pretty much try to cover everything that went down last night and what the next couple weeks look like for the Steelers as they head toward cutdown day and the eventual opening game. Brian Batko is joining us right now. And Brian, just general observations last night. The rookies, let's be honest, we got to call a spade here, Brian. They look like rookies last night, but that's why you have Mason Rudolph at quarterback, why you have Aaron Rodgers, obviously, as your starter. You have some depth. General observations in the 17-0 loss last night to the New York Jets. What did you think?
Yeah, I would say progress, not always linear. It's a good reminder of that. And then also another sports cliche. I mean, you're never as good as you think and you're never as bad as you think. So week one of the preseason, it was all sunshine and rainbows. Everybody felt great about cruising to that win against the Packers and the play of the quarterbacks and the offense and the passing game and the efficiency in the maiden voyage under Mike McCarthy. And then, yes, last night, big regression, all kind of comes crashing back down to earth for a number of reasons. You know, the pass protection was pretty concerning from start to finish. You know, not always a lot of playmaking by the receivers, a lot of whom are going to be going pro in something other than the Steelers' regular season roster, Robby. But by and large, still, I mean, it wasn't what we had become accustomed to seeing from Will Howard on the practice field and in that first preseason game. And then Drew Aller showed some flashes, but obviously not a ton of consistency there with him either.
You know, here's the craziest thing. The New York Jets last year did not have one single interception the entire year, and Will Howard threw two on back-to-back drives last night. And the Jets head coach is Aaron Glenn, who was a first-round pick. Defensive back, great career, great defensive coordinator with the Lions. And here he is last night. They get 2 picks, but again, it's the preseason. But that's kind of interesting when you see them play a team that had as many interceptions combined as you and I did last year, and Will Howard throws 2. So
yeah, the long-suffering Jets fans aren't going to care about that. They're going to want to see it when September rolls around, of course, and they would have loved to have gotten some against Aaron Rodgers, but instead he shredded them last year in week 1 out there at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the Will Howard, the pair of picks there, I think reasonable football minds can disagree on, was it on him? Was it on Roman Wilson in the route running? A lot of the times in my experience covering this sport, Robby, it's some of both. I mean, when you have things go catastrophically wrong like that to spoil promising drives, it's usually not all the blame being laid at one person's feet, even if sometimes our very black and white minds want to make it that way.
Yeah. I took a couple notes from the game last night. So Robert Spears-Jennings, he was a gunner on punt coverage. Just talk about a few bright spots last night. He drew a penalty. He was a 7th-round pick this year. He's going to make it hard on Mike McCarthy, Omar Khan, Art Rooney, the powers that be, and make a decision. Then last week, Rashawn Jenkins trying to play his way onto a roster right now. So, I mean, some of these battles for roster spots. Is there anything for fans to keep an eye on right now that stick out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think those last few spots are sort of linked to the quarterback situation as well. The trickle down will be if they keep 4 of them, if they find a way to roster Mason Rudolph and Will Howard in addition to Rodgers and Aller, then you're going to probably lose a promising young player at the end of the roster, or a journeyman like Rashawn Jenkins, who maybe gives you some peace of mind if you have him on the 53. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're a diehard Steelers fan and you want to kind of see how these roster spots shake out, Eli Heidenreich was a feel-good story, but it's a numbers game in the backfield too, and even Caleb Johnson, I think, is a big story right now. He got a lot more work last night, but it was more sort of the 3, 4, 5-yard run variety, and he just can't seem to, whether it's the burst or the vision or making a guy miss in space, can't seem to rip off one of those long runs, and that's not what you want out of a second-year, third-round pick.
Yeah, that was, and if I remember correctly, in the first preseason game, he didn't get into the game until the second half. Is that right?
5 snaps.
5 snaps, exactly right. I mean, but look, when you talk about draft, here's another one. Gabriel Rubio's another one. a defensive end out of Notre Dame who's going to force them to make a tough decision too at the bottom of the roster in terms of the on the defensive line position as well. So a lot to keep an eye on. Now, one thing I want to discuss here is the Steelers and their philosophy toward drafting. I'm just curious. I watched the press conference that Andy Weidel had, the assistant general manager of the Steelers, and one thing was notable that he said. It was a question that he was asked regarding Joey Porter Jr.'s contract status, and he deferred to Omar and Art and Mike because they handle that. But one thing he touched on, I'm surprised this wasn't talked about more than it was. He said there are three tenets to a successful team: player acquisition, player development, and coaching. And I'm going to quote him. He said the player development, coaching absolutely matter, and I think you're seeing them develop out here now and grow. So I think we're seeing this roster kind of take shape a little bit. I don't know how else you can really decipher those comments that he made, Brian, just in terms of this is kind of what they had in mind when they were building this team when he and Omar Khan took over.
And I think all of Steeler Nation is starved for that development at the most significant position in football, maybe all of sport, when you look at quarterback. And that's why we open so many nightly sports calls talking about that spot. But, I mean, I think there's also really a lot of room for growth with this roster of the next wave of stars to emerge. I mean, you have T.J. Watt and Cam Hayward still playing at a high level, but they've seen more football than they're going to see. Now these guys that have gotten second contracts, Nick Herbig, Keanu Benton on the defensive side, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington on the offensive side. When you have that player acquisition and then that development and then eventually the deployment, now Mike McCarthy and Patrick Graham in charge of that rather than Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith or the offensive coordinators before him.
Right.
That's where you want to see it all come together.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at their first draft, 2023. Three guys have gotten extensions. Now, look, I've heard people mention the word bust with Broderick Jones. He's not a bust. He's played. Now, look, has he played as well? Has he reached his potential that they had in mind, draft him in the first round? Probably not yet at this point, but a couple of things to keep in mind. He had a different offensive line coach, and he was playing out of position, Brian, as well. So, again, not making excuses by any stretch, but maybe with a different coach, a different position coach, a different coordinator, a different head coach, maybe he starts to get out of his head a little bit and can just play football. What do you think?
He's going to need to start quickly because I thought he really struggled last night on some of those sacks. And, guys down the line for the Jets beating him in addition to some of those top liners. And Brian Angelico, the offensive coordinator, was asked about that today down on the south side and said, you have to remember that Jones is still getting back into the swing of things from that pretty severe neck injury that required surgery last season. He's been bouncing around from left to right, but this is a bottom line sport. And yes, it was only the preseason, but they're trying to put the finishing touches on this offensive line so it can gel and coalesce going into the regular season. And I don't think he put his best foot forward last night.
Brian, strap in, baby. We're ready to hear from Steeler Nation. Give us a call, 412-575-2600. Nightly Sports Call continues right after this. Time for the Xfinity Tweet of the Night. Jerry Dulac, longtime Steelers writer, sources: Steelers will keep both Will Howard and Drew Aller on the 53-man roster. Now, Brian, Jerry Dulac is one of the most well-respected, trusted writers to have ever covered the Steelers in the history of the franchise. If this guy's saying something, there's a pretty good chance it's accurate. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure. I know Jerry has good sources, and that's not surprising to me if that is indeed the case. I think you've heard Mike McCarthy talk about Will Howard glowingly since the moment he got the job. And, I remember watching McCarthy on the HBO Hard Knocks season with the Cowboys, and he doesn't like giving up on quarterbacks too soon. And there are two young quarterbacks in that room who had a rough evening last night, particularly Will Howard, who has less invested in him as far as the draft capital. And he's in his second year. Aller's in his first year, albeit Howard didn't get to play in the preseason last year. So that wouldn't shock me at all. Then Mason Rudolph kind of becomes the one that, what do you do with him? But based on last night, I mean, you have to feel better about keeping him around, or I guess I should say, you have to feel like you'd have a lot more confidence in Rudolph going into the regular season as your number two than one of those other two. But let's just let it play out. There's still one more preseason game. You only get 3 data points here before the real stuff starts. And I'm eager to see how those two guys bounce back.
Yeah, and people say put him on the practice squad. You have to put him through waivers. I'm not sure Will Howard passes through waivers. Are you?
No, I'm not sure that he would either. And now he was a 6th rounder, so a lot of teams,
So is
every
Tom Brady.
team.
I'm not saying it's Tom Brady, but you get my point.
Every team passed up on him multiple times in that draft a year ago. Now, Mike McCarthy said somewhere that wouldn't have been the case if he were a head coach in the 2025 draft. So make of that what you will. I think Howard, he had some promising drives stall out, and obviously the miscues weren't good. But it's going to come down to a numbers crunch and whether they can find a way to keep all 4. I'm sure they'd love to, but it's not always realistic when you have to fill out. You got to think about who's going to run down on kickoffs, who's going to run down on punts, who's going to be out there blocking on kick returns. I don't think they're going to have Mason Rudolph doing that if he's active on game days.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He will not be doing that on game day, that's for certain. All right, let's go to Mike in Blairsville, who wants to talk a little Steelers QB situation. Happy Saturday to you, Mike. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I was wondering why everybody's getting down on Will Howard so much there. Do you remember when Terry Bradshaw, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Terry Bradshaw, he was benched like 3 or 4 times before he finally became the quarterback of, one of the best ever. So, if he wasn't from Ohio State, I don't think you guys would be getting on Will Howard at all. But I think you like the Penn State boy better than the Ohio State boy.
Yeah, I was in college for those Terry Bradshaw years, Robby. I don't know about you, but I think with Will Howard, they also really like his character and his makeup. I'm certainly not trying to pick on him at all. I don't think either one of us are. Now, there are always going to be warring factions when you get Penn State, Ohio State. A couple years back, Kenny Pickett had Pitt fans in the mix when it comes to the Steelers and the quarterback situation. But at a certain point, your resume is what you put out there, and not a lot of runway for him because of missing the preseason last year. But I still think they like Will Howard a lot, both the on the field and off the field stuff with him.
And that's what's unfortunate, because I think Mike had a pretty good point there that he just made. Is people are down on Will Howard, and it's like he didn't play in the preseason last year. He played a little bit last week, I believe. Yeah, because he did play a little bit last week, and then he got to start this week. But, how much can you really expect? The NFL's the greatest league in the world. Ohio State, yes, he won a national title, but it's not easy to just step right in, even in a preseason game. At least I wouldn't think. I've played 0 games at quarterback in the NFL, so I can't speak from experience. But, I agree with him. I just think you got to cut him a little bit of slack. Let's shift the discussion a little bit here to talk about this development, because I wanted to expand on this a little bit. People talk about, like, the 2022 draft, Brian. Nobody is left on the Steelers roster from 2022, right? And you look at 23, 3 guys have extensions. The 7th rounder, Spencer Anderson's battling for a starting spot. He might start. Corey Trice got cut mainly due to injuries, another 7th round pick. Broderick Jones needs to step it up. And you got JPJ in the mix as well. And then next year, you might have a couple more you could extend as well. So if you're a Steelers fan and you look at the way Omar Khan and Andy Weidel have drafted, and the way they're starting to develop in the first month under Mike McCarthy, if you're a Steelers fan, wouldn't this be at least a little bit of excitement that you want to see? I know a franchise quarterback is what you need to win, obviously, in the NFL. But, you can't just snap your fingers and make a QB appear. You can't just snap your fingers and bring back the ghost of Ben Roethlisberger. You know what I'm saying?
And I think a big part of the whole conceit of bringing back Aaron Rodgers for round 2 at his age, at 42, is you hope that supporting cast is better and takes another step. And, he doesn't have to elevate as much around him, that he can be a guy who's, somewhat part game manager with also the Rodgers factor when games get tight and you need him in the clutch. So, yeah, if your receiving core is better, if your offensive line is better, if your defense makes strides here with what's really a well-compensated and talented unit over on that side of the ball, then it does make more sense to bring back Rodgers, and you're also laying the foundation for whichever quarterback comes down the road. Is that guy on the roster? We don't know. That's why everybody is constantly riding the wave, and every preseason game is a referendum on the young guys in the group.
Yeah, and all but one guy from the first draft class is on the roster from 2023. When you talk about building, it just takes time. You can't just change this overnight. It doesn't happen that quick. Charlie in Homewood is here. I think you want to talk a little bit of Steelers as well, right, Charlie? What's happening?
We don't have a good offensive line yet. So these young quarterbacks, a second year and a rookie, we don't know because we don't have an offensive line. We should be able to see this next week how the offensive line gels because Aaron Rodgers should be back there or real defense should be starting. But give these rookies a chance.
I wholly agree with that, Charlie. And that's the other thing. You know, Zach Frazier is going to make Pro Bowls. I think Mason McCormick is going to make a Pro Bowl. Faltano's got to, obviously, health is a big reason. But the one thing Andy Weidel said was they want to beat teams down. So even though, you know, look, you got 5 starters on the offensive line. If you have 7 guys that could start, that's a good thing. You give a guy a break or somebody goes down. They have a little bit of depth. And another thing he said was they want to beat teams down, especially in the second half, Brian.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that this year's first rounder, Maxi Honachor, is, got dinged up early in training camp because I'd love to see him out there getting some preseason reps. I mean, I still think the door might be open a little bit for him, even with the injury, if he can get back to full health here and obviously play in this last preseason game. I don't think you'd put a rookie out there, even a first rounder, if you don't see him at all in August for the regular season. But it did look like the depth didn't hold up quite as well on the O-line last night. I was actually going to make that exact point had Robby not gone to you there in Homewood. So, yeah, I mean, that's a group that a lot invested in it. We still need to see it all come together when the chips are down.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know what? It takes time. I mean, it's just they have another rep. Just like you don't want to overreact after a good performance last week, you don't want to go nuts over the crap that they put out there last night. I mean, just to be honest, I mean, it's unfortunate that they just started out slow and never could recover from it. And Charlie had a good point. I mean, the O-line, yeah, certainly could have been better. And Aller got sacked 3 times. We'll be back up to wrap up the sports call. One more segment coming up with Brian Batko right after this on KDKA+. Back to wrap things up here with Steelers insider Brian Batko. Brian, we've got about a minute left. I wish we could do this longer. I know you don't, but I certainly do. For Steeler fans out there, in the week that lies ahead, what are a couple things that stick out to you to keep an eye on between practice and the preseason finale?
Man, you know what? I mean, I think certainly how this quarterback situation plays out with, does Will Howard start again? Do they want Drew Aller to get the ball first? I mean, that was the biggest source of intrigue coming into the preseason, and I think it remains as such. But there was, to me, the biggest story in the NFL today, maybe all weekend. I don't know if you saw this. The Browns quarterback situation. Deshaun Watson booed so vociferously today at home in their preseason game against the Bills that he basically went off against the fan base. I don't know how you're going to start him, let alone keep him on the roster. It's a fascinating situation over there. Every
member of this division, every staff member better thank their lucky stars that the Browns are the Browns. The Browns are just going to I've never seen anything like it. I saw it, and it's absolutely crazy. Brian Batko, thanks for joining us here on the Nightly Sports Call, brought to you by Ireland Contracting. I'm Robby Incmikoski. Thanks for watching us. The next one is coming up tomorrow night, 10:35 on KDKA+. We'll see you then.